All right, so this is on Blackboard already, but I'm just going to kind of go through this for those who may want a little extra. So, looking at theory, just like with methods, theory is very important to social science, and sometimes theory is misunderstood because a lot of people aren't scientists, and so they use theory as a scientist might use the term hypothesis. Like some people will say, well, that's just a theory, meaning that it's not fact. But in the sciences, theory is based on facts. As long as we insist that theories explain facts, the biases of each theory are likely to reveal themselves sooner or later, and we have that. And so basically, it's a set of related facts, and we build facts upon facts, and we build strong theories. And so this is our definition. And so the ultimate aim of a sociological theory is to make accurate predictions of people's behavior in the future. And so the earliest theories in sociology kind of come from the school of what's called functionalism. It's basically positivism, this idea of using the scientific method that was used in the natural sciences. We're going to be now using them in the social sciences. It was Auguste Comte, that a French philosopher, who first suggested that we apply the scientific method to the social world. And so structural functionalism, sometimes referred to as functionalism or functional analysis, attempts to formulate social laws to explain variations in social behavior. And so we're at this point, what science is doing is we're moving away from superstition. We're moving away from religion as an explanation of why the world works. And now we're simply using observable facts and using that to kind of understand, what society is. But from a structural functionalist point of view, there is this kind of assumption that the world is orderly. If you think about the time this came about, we're thinking about machinery and clocks, and everything is rotating in a very logical manner and that sort of thing. And so inside this theoretical lens is this assumption that everything is stable, everything is orderly. It asserts that society is composed of many different parts, like gears in a clock, and each of those parts has a function. Each of those parts contributes to the overall equilibrium of the society. And so sometimes you'll hear a functionalist or analogies of functionalism to that of the human body. And so just like the human body has various parts that play functions for the overall whole of the person, society has various parts that, play various functions. And the equilibrium component of this looks like this. So like, sometimes you'll hear that if someone loses one of their senses, like eyesight, that another sense might kind of step up and kind of compensate for that loss of eyesight. Like hearing may become more acute, or at least the person becomes more dependent on hearing in order to navigate the world. And so as one part fails, as another part kind of comes up to create a balance. Society is the same way. If one of the institutions is in trouble, like the economy starts to collapse because of a financial breakdown or a depression or a recession, then government may step up and they might flood the economy with tax dollars, or they might send out stimulus checks to corporations or maybe even individuals, like recently. Um, Education systems may expand. So community college might offer, more classes that semester to retrain people who are being laid off from their job during this economic transition. And so that provides us with two functions. It's a retraining for the new emerging economy, but it's also removing a lot of people from kind of the workspace for 2 or 4 years and putting them into educational systems. So it kind of acts as a double kind of function. Religion, for those who become underemployed or maybe unemployed, or maybe some people even falling into homelessness, religion will step in with housing and food. And so there's this kind of everyone's kind of every institution is creating this balance. And so it was Talcott Parsons, who was a very famous functionalist, wrote a lot in the 1950s, and he's writing about the family as one of those very functional institutions in society. And he stressed that all societies must, provide for meeting the social needs of the individuals in order for that society to survive. And so when you start thinking about like the two most important functions of any society, think that, okay, number one, reproduction. You must set up a society that encourages reproduction. Even the oldest societies, way before science, way before these, be fruitful and multiply, right? So you got religious texts, in those earlier societies that are suggesting that this must be done in order for society's survival. The number two most important function is teaching the children to conform to the society's values, norms, and that sort of thing. So reproduction and then conformity, the two most important functions. So Parsons was talking a lot about the family again in the 1950s, and he says that men, are socialized into what are called instrumental roles, and these instrumental roles would be like leadership skills, decision making, and then women were, or girls were, socialized into socio-emotional roles or expressive roles, and this would include things like caring for children, nurturing, emotional support, house cleaning. Again, remember this is 1950s, and so because males and females are socialized into different kinds of people from birth, then when they marry and reproduce, they bring different sets of skills to create an overall balance to the family. And so he wrote about this in terms of these different functions kind of playing with this kind of equilibrium and balance. He saw society as a vast network of connected parts, each of which helps to maintain the system as a whole. Another functionalist by the name of Robert Merton, he introduced us to a couple of other concepts, kind of broke functionalism down into what he called manifest and latent functions. And so a manifest function would be the obvious intended functions of any social system, where the latent functions are more subliminal, like they're largely unrecognized and sometimes even unintended, but they're functions nonetheless. So when we think about like new values or norms or new technologies, yeah, and so when society produces, like, okay, go back in time many decades, the invention of the microwave oven. And, what is the manifest function of a microwave oven for society at large? Well, large groups of people can now cook their food faster, thus giving them more time to work or more time to do other things. And so very efficiently we can heat food, eat it, and move on. That's very functional for a society that's really kind of centered around productivity. A latent function of the invention of a microwave oven might be something that was completely unintended, but it was a function nonetheless, and that would be the emergence of new industries, like a whole industry of microwave cookware, microwave cooking utensils, microwave cookbooks. All these industries started to pop up after the fact, but still very functional, but they were latent functions. He also introduces to this concept called social dysfunctions. And so a dysfunction of the emergence of the microwave oven may be the fact that you have a whole generation of people who never learned to cook, or more to the point to where we are cooking so fast, and so we debase basically what it means to slowly cook our meals and to sit around the table with our families and spend that together time, bonding. Now with microwave ovens and drive-through windows, people are kind of eating and moving on, and so that social cohesion is breaking down because we don't center our social activity around food as much as most traditional cultures have done. Applying this to something else. Youth sports, Little League Baseball, Little League Soccer, things like that. The manifest function of signing your children up for something like that would be, okay, physical fitness, uh, teamwork, friendship networks. All these are reasons why you sign your children up for Little League or youth sports. Some of the latent functions, still very functional, but maybe just as important, if not more important in some areas, would be things like, okay, what are we training kids to do when we're actually signing them up for Little League sports? So think about our economic structure, capitalism. Capitalism requires what in order to be healthy and functional? Um, Capitalism requires healthy, functional competition. And so we have to learn to be competitive inside a set of rules in order for capitalism to thrive, because healthy competition prevents monopoly, prevents the erosion of quality, that sort of thing. And so, for the most part, little boys were socialized to be competitive. Little girls' games for a long period of time were more based around cooperation. Games like hopscotch or jump rope, and it's kind of individual. It wasn't so much team sports. And so you're socializing boys to be competitive and you're socializing girls to be cooperative. Those boys and girls grow up to be men and women. And who is likely to plug into that system of competition? Who are the leaders of Fortune 500 companies? Who are political leaders? It's mostly men. However, in the late 80s, 1990s, Little League soccer for girls becomes the most popular Little League sport in America. And so more and more girls since the 1990s have moved into organized sports. And so they are learning also to be competitive inside those rule-based team type sports. And as that cohort moves into adulthood, you will start to see more women in Fortune 500 companies as presidents. In the House and Senate and at the level of presidency. And so, yes, one connects to the other. How we socialize an individual, one aspect of their life affects how they plug into another part of the system. So, a social dysfunction of Little League sports could be injury, could be, again, extreme competition. Some of these Little League sports go all year round and it's extremely competitive. And if you look at, things like heart disease being the leading cause of death in the United States, and that's usually dealt to, it has to do with stress, stress related to extreme competition. The argument can be made that extreme kind of dog eat dog type of competition is also dysfunctional. So this theory went along for a while, and it was kind of the dominant theory, but it had some flaws, and a lot of the criticism that was focused at this theory was based around, it was not only functionalist social science, but it was the field of economics as well. It sees society as kind of embedded with these intractable laws, suggesting that the only reasonable behavior involves accommodation to these allegedly fixed patterns. And so, like this conformity to these patterns that are kind of beyond our control. And that kind of becomes problematic when you start to see the level of some of these things that might be seen as dysfunctional, but are also seen as necessary. Like if things are universal and they pop up, throughout history from place to place, it's oftentimes framed as necessary and functional. So Comte's notion that sociology should attempt to become social physics by describing nature-like social laws freezes the present into ontological ice, portraying such historical patterns as capitalism, racism, sexism, and the domination of nature as inevitable and necessary. And so this particular theoretical pattern has, or lens has a tendency to see these things as, necessary and functional. Sexism is functional, racism is functional, the domination of nature also functional. They must somehow help society to survive. And this becomes very problematic for critics. And so some of these critics began to look at things in a different way. And these are known as the critical theorists. And this is where we're going to move on next with the conflict theory. But critical theorists, unlike functionalists, see change as a good thing. And they see change as coming about when individual consciousness changes, and insist that individuals and individuals in groups have the ability to organize themselves to transform or to change society. And so whereas the functionalists consider stability a good thing, conflict theorists, might ask, well, good for who? Like, if you're at the top, if you have all the resources and you're at the very top of the social strata, yeah, stability is great. You don't want things to change. But if you're at the bottom and you've been on the bottom generation after generation, stability is not really desirable. Change is actually more desirable. And so these critical social theories that we're going to be talking about next under the umbrella of conflict theory sees change as a good thing.